Welcome, everyone, to yet another edition of our webinar series. My name is Tim Mikhelashvili, CEO and co-founder of Amedea Pharma. Today, we'll be talking about how to view and stimulate collaboration on medical affairs teams across pharma and biotech. This is very timely because the value statement of medical affairs is evolving rapidly due to new demands from technology and our healthcare community, which is changing how we are collaborating, contributing, and structuring our teams. However, unfortunately, our leaders, decision makers, and executives often do not have the front row seats to our contributions and the real world resources that it takes to drive those patient and business outcomes. So we're live today on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. And by the end of this webinar, you will learn new practical approaches to driving those underlying behaviors that ultimately lead to more collaboration and performance, and also redefine how your daily contributions drive the impact and success of your companies. So to help me do that, I've invited my distinguished speakers, leaders in medical affairs, formerly at Amgen, Novartis, as well as a physician who is a leader at the intersection of medicine, technology, and philanthropic organizations and strategic partnerships at SAP, Chelmsley Trust as well. And I want to ask all of them to introduce themselves. Luz Ramirez, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Tim. Thank you. And nice to see everyone again, familiar faces. And good morning to everyone out there watching our video today. I've been in medical affairs for 15 years almost, and leading teams in medical operations, medical strategies. And I'm really excited today to share with you a lot of interesting things with Amedea Pharma.
Hey, yeah, good morning. Thanks, Tim. And agree, it's nice to see everybody again, and greetings to everybody watching. My name's Jeff New. I've been in medical affairs for over 20 years. I've done a little bit of everything, started in medical information, field medical, and most recently in operations. So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Look forward to discussing.
Absolutely. Great to see you again. And Alex.
Hey, everyone. Alex Pasek, physician by training, have been in the life science space for just over 10 years. Very interested in the cross-section of innovation and driving innovation in medical affairs. And so very excited and interested to hear today's talk.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. And I think we're bringing different experiences and perspectives today. And I want to invite the viewers to comment, provide us your feedback, and engage in debate. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the gaps in how we view performance, team collaboration, and address some of those underlying motivational behaviors that drive performance, reshape how we communicate our daily contributions, and also preview a solution called ANCORA. So I want to ask the first question to our panel, and that is, why is it that we really don't have that front row seat to team collaboration? Why are we sitting somewhere in the back and not seeing this, this critical process in the background that makes our companies work? That's the engine behind everything that we do.
Well, Tim, I think you have it well displayed on the slide there. The number one issue is we have all of these little compartments or silos within medical affairs, and we're all sort of doing our own thing, tracking our progress different ways, and there's not a central hub where we can view that. I mean, I know a lot of companies create dashboards, but even dashboards, they have different pages for different departments, and I think we haven't really fixed the concept of having a single platform with a common way to measure across the departments.
Okay. And is that changing now? What are some of the trends or some persistent gaps in terms of the speed of the capture? Are there any biases that you're continuing to see? Luz, Alex?
Yeah, for sure. Tim, it's most of the time you see information from other areas of medical affairs, but not in real time, actually. And sometimes you have projects that you need to have real-time information to upload every day. So it's really interesting that as technology moves forward, you need more information on real time in order to talk to your KOLs or in order to make decisions internally to your different stakeholders. So every time it's more important to have that, like everything there ready for you to pick it up in an easy and fast way.
I would agree with Luz, and say that the need for that platform to have the ability to track progress, process, but then also tie to outcomes, especially medical affairs, is huge. And there's medical affairs does so much, and the challenge is it's hard to tie it sometimes to the outcome. And so I think what Amedea and ANCORA solution is doing is genius, and I think it's the next step for the industry to move forward. And we've seen companies do this, sort of make their own home-baked products, but that takes time, effort, and if you're going to do that every time a new team comes on board, it takes a lot of time. And so what you've done is sort of taken your 20 years of experience and put it into a software solution that you can scale and can go to companies and is ready out of the box.
Thanks for those kind comments and evaluation there, because we'll have a chance to preview the solution. So what I'm hearing from you is that we have different formats of data. There's lots of biases still, and in many ways we're restricting ourselves in terms of how we communicate internally with our stakeholders within medical affairs and outside as well. How is that reflecting on terms of our HCP engagement? What are some recent data and statistics that you've seen or your own experience in terms of what's the bottom line? How do our healthcare professionals whom we educate experience these problems?
I have to jump in and say that sometimes we've heard from KOLs that they have conflicting information from one person from medical affairs from one department and another information from another person from medical affairs as well. And they're all under medical affairs for sure. But sometimes they get conflicting information. They don't have a standard information and just clear and cut to the point where they want to hear. So I think something is wrong. There's not a communication between the two groups. It's not aligned. And this happens more frequently than what we think. And we've heard doctors say, but I talked to this person from medical info and she said this, and then now you're telling me this, and now the MSL comes and tells me another thing. So there has to be a way to communicate for everyone. There has to be a one place where they can all see what everyone is saying, so they don't become redundant and they don't become confronting with the doctors. That's something that I've seen a lot, and that you probably have some data on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Luz. And you and I have had these conversations before, privately as well as in our monthly webinars with our audience, where you've shared that experience, and it's substantiated by some recent data from a survey of 150 KOLs from Viva, in which our HCPs and KOLs, they reference this variability, this high variability in terms of the quality of the engagement from one company to the other. And even more importantly, they see that internal coordination that you just talked about in terms of, okay, what did the sales rep really share with me, and how's that different from what medical affairs employee MSL shared, and do they even know that they're meeting with me, right? 44%, right, that actually acknowledge this lack of internal coordination. So what are some of the consequences then of these blind spots, of sitting somewhere in the back rather than the front row as leaders, as team members?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I mean, I think it's decision making. A lot of times we're making decisions based on what we think, or what we feel, in the absence of real data, and that can lead to some bad decisions and some rabbit trails that maybe don't move us forward. Sure.
And yeah, there's plenty of very recent case studies where we are seeing that inaccurate forecasting is leading to many layoffs and poor strategy in large pharma companies and across the board. Let's examine some of the myths also that are still there. I think healthcare analytics and advances in this field in general, particularly in life sciences, have raised our consciousness and our awareness of the importance of measuring performance and efficiency, how efficient we are. But we still have a long way to go to make it exciting, right? It has to be meaningful for our team members. And so, and this is why I think, a lot of us really tie metrics to more competition to this day. And we equate KPIs with outcomes, not really distinguishing them. And there's those who object and who say KPIs are meaningless. It's really the outcomes that count. However, when the KPIs are not clear, or when there aren't any KPIs, that leads to more implicit competition. Or when there's lack of clarity, competition can actually increase. And so these are some of the underlying unseen behaviors that leaders now have to be aware of in order to redefine how they approach metrics. And in terms of the KPIs versus outcomes, they're different, because KPIs actually are describing the relationship between activities and how they lead to outcomes. Okay, an outcome may be a favorable treatment guideline recommendation, but an activity may be an HCP interaction or an insight, right? And so these KPIs have to be explaining that relationship. And if you only measure outcomes, and you don't trace them back to activities, how do you really replicate those successes or avoid failures in the future? As leaders, I think it's really also very critical for you to understand that you can't expect anyone else to work harder than you, okay, for your organization. And I have a particular understanding of this, being an employee, being a consultant, a volunteer, and also a founder, right? And so you always have to know how to stimulate your teams to perform better, because your ultimate metrics depend on their work and how they collaborate. And so here are 6 kind of underlying factors or building blocks of metrics or KPIs. Rules, right? If your teams are not clear about how you define activities or outcomes, then you're going to have input that is not of high integrity. If they don't know how to prioritize one activity versus another, an insight that they gather versus an interaction that they have with a leading scientist, they don't know how to really plan their day and their goals, right? And prioritize. If you have judges that are biased, right? If or you're measuring the wrong metric from a function that is not relevant. For example, keystrokes from someone who is not expected to be near their computer all day, right? Such as someone that is in the field facing customers. That's not very relevant, and it doesn't really motivate your teams to perform. Or the audience, right? How do you communicate the information? Do you communicate it to only your executive teams, or do your team members actually know where they stand at all times relative to others in order to understand what their contributions are? And when do you communicate that information? What's the timing of those metrics, of the KPIs? Okay. And so these are very important in motivating your teams, because it's very easy to be unclear about the KPIs that are used and how they're communicated, and withhold information, have the we versus they type of mindset, right? Where one team is working only towards its end, right? And not sharing information. And so the quality of the KPIs really depends on these factors, and also on the mechanism of how they're collected, as well as throughout the product life cycle, because metrics is really a moving target, right? Before the launch, raising the awareness of the disease state is known to increase product adoption by 40%. After launch, other activities may be more relevant. And so I want to ask the panelists to weigh in on this motivational factor, and how leaders today can use the healthcare analytics that they have at their disposal to stimulate their teams.
I want to start, Tim, by saying that slide where you put out the 6 building blocks of KPIs of high performance athletes or teams. I think it's something that in the day-to-day basis we forget to do. And we need to have a little bit of every of these 6 things every time. And we need to be dynamic as leaders with our teams in order for all these things to like balance out and our teams to get actually motivated out there. And because they're the ones doing the job, they're the ones putting the input. So we need to motivate them in order to have the results captured, in order for them also to have future decisions on their role or on their career, because sometimes they don't want to do it because they think it's only for a matter of just the data and that's it. But in other areas, all this data becomes super important for other things like taking a different career path or having a best practice or many other things. And we need to continue to do that. Sometimes we forget on our daily basis because there's a lot of things going on. But I really like that you brought this to this, because we all want our teams to be high performing teams. That's something that everyone wants, and medical affairs even more. So I really like the way how that is framed.
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Luz. I think this is just a critical first step, before you even get to any kind of tool, that captures information or analyzes information. And this has been a topic for my whole career. Think back over all the medical affairs meetings I've been to, there's always been a section on metrics, or what do we measure, or how do we show medical affairs value. And I think there's definitely been a shift over time in terms of what we measure. I think about like activities, and the classic example is frequency, the number of interactions with an HCP, and that was it maybe in vogue 25 years ago, and now it's you've got some people saying, well, we don't measure that at all. But I think that the work that needs to be done up front is to put those KPIs in action, like you're saying. I mean, the activities by themselves, that doesn't tell you anything, but if you can add some information to that, around what was discussed, how it connects to an outcome or an objective, then it becomes valuable. And so I think there's work to be done there, and that's a critical step.
We talked a little bit about different ways to drive performance. Well, what are some of the questions you need to ask as executives in order to have a more clear line of sight? And they are really, what are all the different things that your team members are doing? Are there internal activities that are valuable when you train an entire sales force, for example, that everyone is aware of? There are countless leaders and executives I continue to meet to this day who tell me, look, I'm very busy throughout the day, but my boss doesn't really know all the things that I'm doing. And I'm hearing that not only from field level contributors, but even from executives. And so we are going to shift now towards redefining the workflow and apply a solution, different approaches, where I'm going to ask our panelists to see how they would really implement and make this a little bit more clear, and for teams as well as for leaders. Because at the end of the day, I've never met someone who was excited about tracking their performance after a busy day, after a long day. But nevertheless, it is very valuable, right? And we have to make it valuable. And so here on the right side here, we have other questions that we can ask. And that is, who do our team members collaborate with, and how do they really collaborate? Okay. And so we're going to now share a solution that's now available for everyone called ANCORA. And I want to invite also the viewers to challenge us, to ask us questions as they come up, because we are doing our best to share some of the most practical, real-world scenarios that take place, in pharma and in medical affairs. And so here's one dashboard from ANCORA from a team lead's perspective, which actually allows you to see how different team members collaborate on a new outcome that changes strategy or behavior among HCPs, among the healthcare community, and for patients as well, right? So as you will see here, you have 4 different types of team members who perform different types of activities that are linked to this outcome to varying levels of certainty, all of which are distinguishing the ultimate impact of those outcomes and activities that are scored. And this is within your control as a team leader, as a champion, who is able to indicate the relative value or impact of the one outcome versus another in terms of how it's aligned to a company objective, how far it reaches, right? Is it international, national, regional, how long it lasts, and also the certainty as well. Okay. Now, if you were to create a new outcome, okay, so for example, a new product formulary addition, which we currently do, right? We have very interchangeable definitions of outcomes and activities, which we currently capture in various different platforms. You cannot save such an outcome in this platform, and I want to demonstrate that with this error message. Add at least one activity, meaning you cannot capture an outcome without tying it or connecting it to some previous activity. Okay. And so this is how you would be able to really capture the intent rather than just the activity alone. All right. So this is what makes this particular perspective more intentional, and to clarify the purpose of why you should be using a platform like this. And it makes it quite simple as well. Also provides you with hyperlinks to that outcome as well for others to review. Now, what are some kinds of dashboards that are also unique that address some of those differences among metrics and KPIs? Right? We know that the value of KPIs change over time, and so we need to keep our hand on the pulse of the value of every activity during our changing workflows and across the product lifecycle. So in this case, this is a grading system of KPIs and the strength level of their connection and how likely they are to lead to outcomes. So this is similar to endpoints that you design, okay, that have a hierarchy, or national treatment recommendations that have grade A versus grade B, grade C level of evidence. This allows you to make sure that you're spending most of your resources where they are more likely to lead to those bottom line outcomes on patients and the business as well. Now, in terms of stimulating performance and team collaboration, I want to show this dashboard, which demonstrates the level of effort that is differentiated by impact that you set yourself as the team lead. So you can see the individual leaderboards, which you can filter by teams. So in this case, there's 3 medical science liaisons, 3 MSLs and field medical who work for this company. The level of progression, how do they improve over time, their progress quarter over quarter, as well as a team view of not only their activities, but their impact. This is weighed by impact points. Translating the daily contributions into the ultimate share of the company's success and outcomes is actually represented here in this composite score of both weighed activities and outcomes called the Corporate Contribution Index. So we work in a non-revenue generating function in medical affairs, but regardless of where we work, all of us want to know the impact that we're making. Okay, so the healthcare analytics now allow us to build our own predictable AI algorithm that we can explain and supervise, which is the case here in ANCORA. Okay, so here what you see is various different teams with their different contributions that's visible to them, as well as to the leaders. And you can customize those views, meaning if you don't want to communicate that to a particular audience, you can hide this dashboard if you wanted to. So in this example, field medical is not contributing to the same extent as the other teams, and it has 3 members, as I mentioned. What that would lead you to do as a leader would be to perhaps consider this dashboard, KPI recommendation dashboard, to see how you can add more activities to their workflow of field medical MSLs that are more likely to lead to outcomes, and get them to go up this leaderboard in terms of corporate contribution index. And the objective CCI actually looks at those contributions based on the various different strategic imperatives or goals you have as a company. So you would want to see how field medical is contributing to clinical development support, for example, recommending clinical trials. So there are a range of other dashboards. This is just a preview. But what I will also end on here before I go to the audience and to my expert panelists is this is how you capture information here, okay? Where you have a list of different types of things you can do, you're expected to do in your role, which are specific to field medical versus medical in publications and others. And all it really takes is several different clicks to go through this list and just be recognized and acknowledge how you distributed your work throughout the day. Okay, there's no need to press submit. There's no multiple drop downs. Several clicks. It's a minute a day that it takes for you to capture your activities or import them. All right, and notifications are sent by the team lead in order to reduce the recall bias, and you can set the frequency to make sure that the data that you collect is actually meaningful and has quality and integrity. So I'll summarize the benefits of ANCORA. Translating the daily contributions into impact, right, in a single central platform. Capture both internal, external contributions to have a more holistic and realistic view of performance. And here are different use cases or scenarios where a platform like this could be useful. Pre-launch, launch, scientific conferences where you have a team that has to collaborate, or mergers and acquisitions when you need to demonstrate that you're organized. You have the SOPs necessary to retain your team or to make sure that the sale goes through. Okay, so these are the different scenarios that I want our speakers to have in mind as they comment on how they would use a platform like this, how they would separate activities from outcomes. How would you define them today? So, Jeff, Luz.
Yeah, Tim, just as you're going through that, it's a lot of information. There were two thoughts I had that sort of stood out. One is, a lot of companies, and I bet people watching this, you're sort of doing part of this anyway, right? When you go through your annual budget process and you sort of are thinking about what do you want to accomplish and what are the tactics that you're going to perform to accomplish those outcomes. So you're doing this information, you're thinking about these things. This tool allows you to take the next step, which a lot of times gets lost, and that's how do we measure it? How do we keep our finger on the pulse of what we thought was important, when we made our plans? And so I think that's a real advantage. But that said, the other piece of this, like you mentioned earlier, is that people don't often like to measure their performance. And so I think this is a classic sort of change management, case where you really need to cast a vision for the users and say, this is where we're going. This is our destination, and this is how what you do moves us along, and get that buy-in, for people to participate. But then, once you have that, I think, the 4 scenarios that you put on the slide are definitely relevant, but there's all kinds of scenarios where demonstrating medical affairs value is important.
Great. Yeah, thanks for kicking us off with the discussion there, Jeff. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I was thinking on the applications when you say here scientific conference, but there's a lot of planning behind scientific whenever you have a scientific event or a symposium, and whenever you have a medical affairs booth and all these things. And sometimes not every single person of the team is able to see what actually happened on the MSL booth, for example. What type of information was there. It remains with them, but it's not out there to other people who might be interested in some information that can change their strategy in from there on, for example. Maybe some MSLs actually benefit from what they were talking about, what the medical information people were talking about during the conference or during the booth. So sometimes there are a lot of situations where we're having people working simultaneously, and at the end, we don't share the information with them. We just stay with it. And I think we are missing out on a lot of good insights that we might have. And this is just one example of a lot of activities that we do in medical affairs. So it's great to know that you can have everything and it can be visible for everyone, and the impact of everyone can be shared with all the different teams. And from a leadership perspective, I think it's really positive to see the big picture and how every team contributes to what your project and how your goal is achieved, or how you're going to get to your goal. So I really like that. I like that you can have that availability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Tim, sorry, I agree with everything that Luz just said, and there's probably not a lot I can even say on top of it. But I will say that the internal and external abilities to annotate that is also big as well, because as Luz was saying, there's that external focus, there's the internal focus, but it's also sort of, what does the medical affairs team do internally that technically is there to aid the sales group or education group that they're maybe not getting full credit for. And this is sort of provides that transparent dashboard to show, yes, no, they were involved, right, in many of these stages. So I think that's helpful as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to just go back to just different ways that you define activities and outcomes very quickly, because I've had some experience with this myself, where we didn't get those recognitions that you just talked about, Alex, on the medical team in an oncology product launch, first in class. And what the medical team then did was create their own customized Excel spreadsheet dashboard, where we defined outcomes as any internal or external activity that involves learning or teaching and ultimately drives strategy, change, or behavior. Okay. And what that led us to do was to be more intentional, and it increased just our acknowledgement and relevance within the organization. But there are different ways that you can, approach what you want to track and the level of detail. Currently, we have many different tools, but we also have a lot of details. Multiple drop downs, as I mentioned, is currently the standard, right? Where you go into a lot of detail into what you discussed, maybe some tools that help us demonstrate what slide you showed and how did the physician react to that slide as well. That has been implemented in various different organizations. But then you have other blind spots where it's only one part of your team that is using that platform, not someone else, like Luz mentioned earlier, right? And so there are various different ways that you can customize this platform in terms of how you define these activities. In this particular organization, what I've done purposely is I've taken a less detailed approach, and a more, in terms of what you're sharing, but a more bottom line kind of a workflow distribution approach, right? In terms of, okay, it doesn't go into as much detail into what slide you showed or what you discussed, but you could do that. But it provides you with just a workflow distribution and relative impact and the ultimate bottom line outcomes that are listed here. So the reason why I kind of contrasted my approach here in this demo, for example, in the customizability is what are some different ways you would implement this, or how have you defined activities or outcomes in your teams before, or maybe provide some tips for our audience, particularly Jeff and Luz. This question is for you too.
Yeah, happy to. So like I mentioned, I think for me, I think back again to doing some of these, budget plans where, we define our strategic objectives. For example, you might want to increase urgency around, patient identification, that sort of thing. Then what are the tactics that are going to roll up to that? You're going to do some education. You're going to have some publications. Field medical may have some targeted sort of insights or education programs that they do that roll up to that. And so you connect all those things together, and then, having a place where you can capture that and see it, as the year progresses.
Okay. So there's various great examples there. Thank you. Yep. And some of which I think I had shown there. So it sounds like you're in agreement with some of those activities. All right. So I want to remind the audience again, this is your opportunity to ask some questions. We have received a few, and let's wrap up in the next few minutes with some final thoughts. Here are some of my final thoughts, and I want them to ask the panelists to chime in as well. Keep in mind that when you set your strategy, you have to have realistic views of how your teams collaborate in order to have realistic expectations, okay, and forecasting and goals. So really, the word workflow is not very exciting. It's gaining more importance, but you need to make it realistic and one that is going to give you that, that visibility that you need, right? It's critical, in fact. Current performance platforms, as we talked about, Luz, I think, mentioned this. She emphasized this. They are leading to us being very uncoordinated. And the HCPs are seeing that. They're very busy. They have also technology that is guiding their decisions. And so customize how you define performance platforms and, make sure that you break down that fragmentation, across the organizations. Third, the value of KPIs and the quality, it changes all the time. So analyze it in more detail, give it more meaning to your teams. And finally, it's possible for you to redefine your performance capture into personal records. You want your teams to break personal records, to speak freely about what they've done, captured performance, in order to be excited to break those records, set new standards, and replicate them in the future. Okay, so putting it all together, once again, it's very important to tie purpose of your platform to progress and reward, which the ANCORA app aims to do. And so if you have any questions, if you want to have a more detailed demonstration or discussion regarding this ANCORA platform, get in touch. Okay, so here are the details. Okay, my email or my Calendly. Those of you who are watching this webinar will receive the slides, and you'll look forward to these upcoming webinars as well. March 20th is our next one. We'll talk about pharma partnership with HCPs to improve healthcare quality. And so there are some questions, but before we go to them, what are some points you'd like the audience to leave with?
I want to start by saying that sometimes we focus a lot on outcomes and we forget how our teams get to those outcomes. And the journey is also something important that we need to take into account. In teams, we have very different types of people, and their performance might be very different. And we cannot forget about that, because we need to show also our executive teams that our team is full of people who work differently. And these types, ANCORA can help you at some point see how the journey of different people on your team, how they actually performed and how they actually get to an outcome. And some necessarily might not be the same as the other, because there's a lot of different variables that affect that. So let's not forget also that there's also a journey that we need to also highlight for our people who are out in the field. And sometimes that journey is a lot more powerful than the real outcome per se. So I just wanted to leave with that thought.
Great. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, Tim, I'll just add, I think, this provides a mechanism, to do these measurements. And there's just lots of benefits to it. I mean, demonstrating value to the rest of the organization, being able to, make decisions that are impactful and move us along. But I think another aspect, that maybe doesn't get as much attention is, you were talking about the personal records. It uncovers winners, in medical affairs. And I think commercial usually does a great job of, recognizing their people and, acknowledging contributions. Medical, not so much. So I think this gives you a mechanism to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just want to say,
for emphasizing that.
All right, sorry. Yeah, I agree everything with everyone, what everyone's saying. I also think that real-time visibility into, the takeaways that the team is doing in the field at that moment is super useful. Having it all in one platform, and then obviously that can inform strategy for updating strategy, changing strategy, and just maybe the medical affairs team needs to look at new territories or talk to different KOLs. And, as Luz was saying, every journey is different for each, contributor and individual team. So I think that being able to see sort of that stack from a 10,000-foot view in a dashboard, I think is very helpful.
Yeah. Great. So I summarized it as adopting a dynamic view of strategy, as Alex just mentioned. So great. Well, thank you so much. These are very important and critical points. I think all three of you made. I completely agree with you. And now I want to also get in somewhat of a debate and some reflection. So one question that has come in is, does the size of the team impact the extent to which we analyze performance?
Well, I think it can. I think, smaller companies, smaller teams, people are wearing more hats, I think, and there's more administrative burden based on, all of the things that they're doing. And so that could impact how closely things are measured.
Yeah, I'll say also that, just from a statistical perspective, you do have sort of more data to go on if you have a larger team. And so that if you do have sort of that stored information in a platform, you're able to then compare contributor to contributor, team to team. And so the larger the team, I think, as Jeff was saying, they're going to be more specialized in that area. So you'll be able to take a look at that easier.
Okay.
I want to be devil's advocate. On the other side, it could be an opportunity, because if I have a small company and I'm seeing that their job is absolutely very impactful and that I need more on the cells, well, I have the data, not too much data, but I have the data to support it to a leadership team and say, hey, these people are doing a great job. We can expand this to other areas, or so it can also be however you want it to, you can also use it in a purposeful way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Great perspectives there. And I, in order to be able to scale, I guess, and to build a strong business case, you may also need to start early, right? To your point there, Luz. So what are some ways that we can leverage performance to redefine our structure now in terms of how our changing workflow is impacting what we do all the time, right? How can we, analyze some of performance data in a different way so that we can go to our stakeholders and tell them, look, we need to work on more clinical trials, or maybe work closely with clinical development, or because the structure of medical affairs is also under question and evolving.
Well, I think the way that you've sort of built in the concept of weighting activities and the impact that they have and being able to measure against that shows which areas, which activities are having the greatest impact. So to Luz's point earlier, if field medical is having a big impact, but there's things that are going undone, then that would justify enlarging the team. Or like you mentioned, maybe doing more to support clinical trials would be something that's hugely impactful.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, go ahead, Luz.
I just wanted to say that the more precise and the more you have identified the key KPIs and outcomes that you're going to get, it's just so much information that you can get for your strategy. You can input it into any strategy per se. So we have to be very keen on what type of information we want to capture in order to get it into any strategy that we have. So I think that's mainly the point.
Okay. Yeah, so there's the third question here, and I think you've addressed it now, Luz, in terms of what are some of the success factors to implementing and championing a new platform, such as ANCORA or others. So I think you've addressed that one. Thank you very much again to the panelists and to the viewers. You'll receive the slides. We'll see you soon. March 20th is our next webinar, and we look forward to hearing some best case studies and successes with 2025 in terms of new approaches to viewing and stimulating team performance. Thank you again. Thanks, everyone.